Hello, everybody. Welcome back. Episode 9 of the Stoneywood Dyce Cricket Club podcast. And today, I mean, the word legend probably gets banded about a bit, but I think in this case, it's probably worth it. So Alan Barron joins me. How have you been coping in lockdown, Alan?
I no bother at all. Just get up every morning and press restart, and just do the same again. Perfect existence for a retired manny. No bother.
Yeah, exactly. No, that's good. So today we're just going to go over a bit of a club history for everyone. I thought it'd be quite interesting to find out how the two sides, Stoneywood and Dyce, came together, and obviously 30 years down the line, we're doing pretty well for ourselves. So a man who's been here from the start, from well before the start, and is still a leading figure today. So first of all, AB, I mean, club history. So before that, yourself, you've done pretty much everything in Stoneywood Dyce, really. You've been president, you've been groundsman, you've been player. Some of the roles you've done?
Secretary, treasurer, junior convener.
Picking juniors up to go to cricket, everything.
General dog's body, yeah. And get picked for the lower 11s on a Saturday when they're away from home because you've got a car. And, that's how it works. That's how you get a team of youngsters to the ground. Somebody's got to drive them there.
Exactly. We'll get onto that in a minute because I mean that is a key point as to why we produce so many players. But anyway, so club history. I mean, start from the start. Stoneywood, founded in 1850.
Founded in 1850. Founded by the Perrys who had the paper mill, and some of them had a public school education and whatever. And the first 3 grounds that Stoneywood played on were actually within the grounds down at the paper mill. I could tell you the names if I went and is that upside down? It's back to front.
No, that's right. Yeah, that's right.
That's one of those great tricks of a Zoom call. You get things back to front. But that's the centenary booklet, which we picked up a couple of years ago when one of the former players had passed on. And it's a guy that I probably had met once or twice in my life. It was long before my time, but we picked that up along with another couple of bits and pieces at the auction house, and there was 3 grounds within the perimeter of the mill, and the mill expanded and meant that bits of ground were no longer free and whatever. And then People's Park, as it is now at the top of Market Street, it was initially known as the Market Stands, and but People's Park had been one of the grounds down at the mill, I think, and they moved it up to, they changed the name, and it was still owned by the mill up until about the last maybe 20 years. I'm not exactly sure when we bought the ground off the mill. The mill had sold off the bowling green to the New Hills Bowling Club, which is still good. Well, Ian Leask now plays there, and Mike Clark, who's a Stoneywood player of my era, he plays there as well. There's been a few others. They also sold off the football ground and the tennis courts, but they were sold for housing. So that's these are sort of things that happened back.
So quite a successful team then. I mean, you've listed here they've won Grade 1 13 times in history, Aberdeenshire Cup 22 times. So some of the main stars that you remember from the Stoneywood team?
Well, my father moved to Stoneywood in 1970, and in the first 3 years he was there, and I think he had a decent score in the first final, but they won the cup final 3 years in a row, 70, 71, 72. And the stars were guys like Ian McRae and Hugh Key, who are just absolute, I mean, nobody bother call me a legend. They were proper legends. They were great players and great committed club men. They were tremendous players.
They did the People's Park groundwork as well, didn't they, in later years?
Ian certainly did it. Hugh was more involved with coaching the youngsters. He was one of the guys that went through the coaching badges way back in the early 80s, mid 80s, including getting the level 2 coaching thing, which meant going to Largs. And Hugh was one of the better equipped coaching lads. He was tremendous at it. His enthusiasm was great, and that's what carried him through. And Ian would just quietly go on and work on the ground, and lots of things were happening when nobody could see it. Exactly the same when I was groundsman. It was best when there was nobody getting under your feet.
Yeah.
Folk offering to help and being a bloody nuisance.
Yeah. No, that's good. And then, so any memorable games from Stoneywood that you can remember? just like general, not you, maybe not you involved in, but just.
No, I mean, I was there in 1970 when my father moved there, and I'm fairly sure I was on the scorebook all season. What a wee fat lad. I think I'm the same weight these days, just I'm a lot taller. It was, you know, it was great fun. I thoroughly enjoyed it.
Yeah.
And you always got decent tea at Stoneywood. It was Ian McRae's mother would have done it way back in the mists of time. And then Bernie Slessor's wife. And you know, there was genuinely families came along. And that's what I remembered. And that's why I was always so keen to make sure that when we got the youngsters going properly, that the families were included and not, we didn't have, you know, somebody would press the ejector seat and the kids would be thrown over the wall and come back and fetch them afterwards. It's always good that people were part of it. That's how it was when I was a youngster.
Yeah, well, it's key, isn't it? We are a family club and we preach that. Still to this day, I would say we are. Everyone's involved. As I think Paddy Maroney said it in another podcast. It's not just one person; it's the whole family is part of the club.
I mean, that's Stoneywood. I was there for 1970. It was 1970 was the start of Dyce getting up into Grade 1, and they were almost continuous from there. Then one year they fell down, but they bounced straight back up. But Dyce had a family set up as well. The Lambs, the Leask, Bob Christie, and various others. They had a good setup going in terms of people who were following all the time.
Yeah. So then on to Dyce then. So they were formed in 1948 as Dyce Lads Club. So they played at Stewart Park, was it?
Certainly Stewart Park all the time, and I've been involved in cricket. They were one of the teams that used Stewart Park. It was them and Westburn in my playing times. I think prior to then, the likes of Woodside, it would make sense if Woodside had played there. I think they did. I should probably know some of these things because I'm helping a guy out in a project about cricket grounds in Scotland, and I was asked about the ones in Aberdeen and Aberdeenshire, so I should probably know where Woodside played, but it's not. I mean, it's too obvious to think I've got that one wrong.
So then, was there any Dyce v Stoneywood games that you can remember, or was there a big rivalry, or not really? Was it just a?
There was a rivalry. There were tasty encounters. There's no getting away from that. We gave it our all. But we went to the pub after the game. I mean, that was one of the tricks back in the 70s and through the 80s. People went after the game, home and away. You went for a drink with the opposition. Totally different days, of course. And I think most of us would be fairly able to admit that their car knew their own way home. Nothing to boast about, but it did happen. You know, the drink driving regulations have changed the post-match activities. I mean, we would have, that was all part of our preparation for any Sunday games, was going having a bucket on a Saturday.
Yeah. So can you remember any tasty Dyce v Stoneywood games? Any nail biters or anything?
Oh, there's plenty of nail biters. There's certainly one whiskey one, I thank me for mentioning this one, because I think Stoneywood were struggling towards the end of a cup final at Manifield and chasing down the Dyce score. And Moyer was in the middle, and Leask came on supposedly to clear out the tail. And Moyer plunked him 3 times into the car park and an over. And I think it was Bob had said to Ian, because Ian would tell the story, Bob had said, "Isn't that ball on his legs?" And Ian says, "I'm not bowling on his legs. He's just picking the damn thing up and picking it over mid-wicket." So it was just the Moyer that we came to know. He was a young lad in those days, but he was in and he scalped it.
Yeah.
And, I mean, I was one of the tail end Charlies that hadn't batted in that game. And the other guy was a guy, Ali Fraser, who'd actually come to us from Dyce. Ali was quite an interesting character. I'll say interesting. I won't be harder than that.
Just in case he's watching.
Yeah, but I doubt it. I don't know if Ali's actually still with us, but we used to go, Stoneywood, after home games, used to go to the Runway Inn, which is now the Dyce Tandoori.
Oh, right, okay, yeah.
Stoneywood. And Ali's wife would come in to pick him up. And Ali would, when he knew it was time for his wife to come, he'd get up another 3 pints on the table, and God knows what would happen. And the story that some of us old guys will always remember is Ali's wife coming in and hurling a fish supper. It hit the wall behind Ali's head and sort of just dribbled down the wall. So you can say some of us remember that one fondly, and probably remember some of the antics more than we do the games.
Yeah, that's good. So, I mean, that's a brief rundown of the the names and players who played Stoneywood and Dyce. So first of all, how did the amalgamation come about? I mean, I've got a little thing to share with you that you sent me yesterday with just a P&J's version of events, I suppose. Maybe not, as we know, the press aren't always on the ball, but so I mean, it says here basically that the Dyce team folded, couldn't raise enough players. So how did the amalgamation come about in your eyes, maybe?
If we just turn it back a year, Dyce used to run a first 11 and a second 11, as did Stoneywood.
Yeah.
In fact, Dyce's second 11 were reserve grade was made up of second 11s only. The second 11s weren't mixed through the other clubs as became the case where you come through. So Dyce second 11 actually folded in 1990, and Dyce finished third in the league behind Coetzer and ourselves in 1990. But I mean, speaking with Bob and Leask, they'll say that many a time they were playing with 9 men or whatever, but it was a damn good 9.
Yeah.
Even with that, there were some good players in it.
3 Lambs, Coetzer, Leask.
Aye, well, maybe 2 Lambs for that stage. Bob's back had probably sort of given up. Bob was a good in-swing bowler. God, he was a good bowler.
Mm-hmm.
Pete Coetzer was here every now and again. I mean, he's always been involved in the oil and gas industry, so he was always, you can come in and go and going offshore and whatever. So, I mean, when Pete was at home, he was one of the best bats going at that stage. So that was in 1990. So there was, we finished second, Dyce finished third. We lost a couple of players over the winter, 90 into 91, and we were aware of it. But come the new season, the first round of fixtures, we were due to play each other, and I'm fairly sure Bob phoned us on it might have been the Tuesday night, because knowing that after practice we would adjourn to the 4 Mile Inn in Bucksburn, we would be down there. I think we're banned for the runway by that stage. Maybe something to do with Ali Fraser's wife. And the phone call came through, and the bar manager came through and says, "Alan, we've got Bob Lamb for Dyce on the phone for you." So that's fine. So I went through, and Bob said, "Well, we're sort of really up against it. We haven't got the numbers." And I mean, I knew what it was like from the year before. And we were sitting just quietly. So after we got this message, he said, "Look, we're going to have to scratch." Went, "Oh, okay." And I think it was Ian McRae and Colin Moyer and Adrian Wedingham and myself were probably sitting in the 4 Mile, and went, "I reckon we should just say to Dyce, come on board." And Colin Moyer was detailed to go to Flower Scene in Bucksburn, which was run by Bob's wife, Pauline. Mm-hmm. And Bob always helped out there anyway. So he went there, spoke to Bob, and that was probably on the Wednesday. And there you were by the time with the Thursday came round, it's in the paper. No. And it was just decided that those who wanted to continue, the Dyce players who wanted to continue playing cricket, the majority of them just sort of rolled across, and it was a fairly simple move. There was no big deal made of it. We just wanted to go on and do things. Yeah. I mean, we knew that we'd lost a few of our second 11, so we were going to struggle to field the second 11 in 91. But once the Dyce lads came across, the top 11 became a mix of the Dyce and Stoneywood top lads. And then the second 11 was a damn good side. I think it might even have won the league in that first year in the reserve grade. But they were good players. A lot of good young lads amongst it. Colin Campbell, Stuart Breed of Stoneywood, who used to do all our print and stuff.
So was there any animosity or anyone? Did anyone from Dyce or Stoneywood really go against the move? Because you said obviously there was a rivalry, but there was a lot of fun in it as well.
No, none of the folk that were actively involved with either club, that I can remember, dropped out. There were a few people who had dropped out previously, whose opinion didn't matter because they weren't around anymore. That was my view. Mm-hmm. That's maybe fairly harsh, but I wasn't going to lose any sleep about somebody who'd already walked out.
Exactly.
Hallelujah, you know.
Yeah, so I mean, on from that, it's probably the best phone call ever made really for the club. So going on from there, decided to go into the Strathmore leagues as Stoneywood Dyce in 1994. So why was that? Was there a committee meeting that said we want to take this club to the next level, or what happened?
Well, it started off with a couple of the. Well, in fact, David and Robert Lamb both said we'd like to have a dig at playing at a higher level. You know, we were playing in the grades, and the grades were being dominated by a really strong Coetzer side. The Coetzer had no desire to step across and go into Strathmore Union, because I mean, we spoke about it as clubs at different stages. We'd been speaking about it for a number of years. In fact, Inverurie had left Grade 1 and gone into Strathmore Union a year or two beforehand.
Yeah.
And at that stage, there was a lot of talk about maybe a pyramid of some sort emerging. And there was a lot of people not interested. They were quite happy to play within a 30-mile radius. That's fine.
Mm-hmm.
But David and Robert had this vision, and a few of the rest of us went, maybe we should give it a go, because we knew Inverurie were there, and they'd been a strong enough side, but inconsistent, and they did reasonably well. I mean, we've lost over fairly quickly there. In the first year we were together, we actually won the Small Clubs Cup.
Yeah, sorry. Yeah.
And that was against Inverurie down at Forfar. So the first year together, and it was. We'd a decent cup. We'd always been a decent cup side, but we'd never rolled sides over. A bowling attack wasn't going to blow folk away.
Mm.
Having said that, with people like Balsillie and Bayman and Colin Clark before that, I mean, we'd had some top-notch bowlers, but we could never quite roll sides over.
So I suppose first year, you're right, you won the Small Clubs Cup. Am I right in saying that your dad had a big impact on making that cup or forming the cup? Have I not got that right? I thought he was. I thought he helped.
No, he'd nothing to do with that. No, he'd been the president of Stoneywood in 1990 and 1991.
Oh, maybe that's what I'm getting confused. There was someone. I remember there was someone around Amalgamation.
He would never have made it, and they could make a cup of tea.
Anyway, so the 1994 we're going to Strathay, and that's when we recruited our first overseas amateur. So David Shaw came on board. I mean, so that must have been a real turning point for the club to try to get to the next level, getting overseas guys in. And I mean, first season we were 4th in Strathmore Union, so we fitted in quite well.
We fitted in very well. I mean, David Shaw. Well, it was Pete Coetzer was behind that, because Pete was aware that there was some magazine for a weekly newspaper for South African people, and somehow David Shaw picked this thing up, and he contacted Pete, and from there he came and played, and he stayed out at, well, Coetzer stayed at Keg at that time, near Rafford, and David Shaw stayed there, and he was a good player. Well, Dave Shaw came to us because Pete Coetzer put some advert in, whether it was an Afrikaans-speaking newspaper or some sort of thing down in London, maybe in youth hostel. It was maybe places, and I think David had been in a youth hostel or something down there. Seen this thing. If you fancy a game of cricket, here's an opportunity in it. Mm-hmm. And he came up and he stayed with the Coetzers at Keg, out beside Rafford, and he was a good bat. He was the start of a long line of players coming from the Alberton Club in Johannesburg, because he was across for the first 2 years, and then but he then moved to another club and he sent a lad across. And
Alberton's Paddy Maroney, Casper van der Walt, the list goes on, doesn't it?
Who was the fast bowler a couple of years ago? Jack
Costa. Yeah, Costa.
And Alberton was where Liam Lindsay stayed, though he didn't play for them.
Yes, he played for Old Fits. Yeah.
So I mean, we'd and there was Hein Bester, and there was a list of people came from Alberton, John Lemaitre.
Mm-hmm. So there was one other thing I forgot to mention, the amalgamation stuff. Do you think the club now would have happened if the amalgamation didn't happen in 91? do you think it would have eventually, even if Dyce didn't run out of players that evening, do you think it would have eventually happened, or do you think Stoneywood itself or Dyce itself would have not come together but done it on their own?
I doubt if we'd ever been able to achieve it either of us on our own. Yeah. It needed a dynamic. Because the thing that we actually got was Dyce and used Stuart Park, and they weren't allowed to do any of the maintenance work there because the council said, no, you're not allowed to do anything. But when they came to join us at People's Park, it was the number of people, you know, the Bob, Kevin Maver, Ian Leask, and there were others, Robert and David Lamb. They just rolled their sleeves up and got involved with things because they'd realised from the way we'd spoken when we played against them before, the pride that we had in what, if we ever achieved anything, you realised you were achieving it through your own efforts. You know, there was no sponsorship at that stage. There was nothing. You know, you just rolled your sleeves up, and every club had a handful of people that made things happen. But all of a sudden, we two handfuls of people. You know, so we'd more people willing to make things happen. I don't think it would have happened for either club if we hadn't come together.
Yeah. So yeah, blessing in disguise. So anyway, moving on. I suppose another highlight would be in 1995, Stuart Coetzer played for Scotland under 13s. I mean, that's the first. We'll get on to the producing a mental amount of talent later, but that's probably the first in a line of a very successful junior setup.
Yeah, that's why I mentioned it. Stuart was in that under 13 side because he was the first. And it's difficult to track any of that in the Cricket Scotland website now because I don't think they recognise much below under 15 level. Yeah. I think they thought that there was too many. There was a lot of folk who maybe thought they'd arrived if they got a game for the under 13s, and that was actually you had to continue working. And Stuart certainly worked up and down the country for the training sessions and whatever.
Yeah,
as did others.
So then, 96 and 97, we won Strathmore Union, so we'd started to dominate that level, and National League obviously was calling, but we lost to Carstorphine in 96. Do you remember much about that game in the National League playoff?
It was played in a bit of a pudding pitch down at Dunfermline, and we never got into it. I think they're pro with a decent score. We never got into it. We just it didn't work for us on that day. But we were disappointed, and that sort of was the motivation. But of course, in between times, between that 96 and 97 season, is that correct? Is that when we got Noxie?
Yeah, that's what I was going to say. You talk
about come in for 97. Aye.
Yeah, you talk about key figures and moving the club from here to here. Knox is probably right at the forefront of that, isn't he?
Oh God, I mean the work that he put in, in the schools, all the schools, Newmarket, Dyce, Stoneywood, Bucksburn, Cloverfield, Hillocks. I mean, he was in and out of those schools. I mean, he actually fixed up a tournament which, where I got the indoor hall at BP at Dyce. And Knox had 12 teams of kids, 2 from each school. And with a whole weekend when that place made a fortune because the amount of rubbish it was bought for food and drink, and parents that were in watching, looking down through the
Is that the one that Fee would have spoke about?
Aye.
Yeah. So I mean, there you go. You've got talent there already. You've got Gordon Gowdy probably in that as well.
There was a little wee tubby lad called Michael Leask in that as well. You know.
Whatever happened to him?
No idea.
I haven't heard of him. Anyway, so you've got Noxie, and then it's almost a similar story to the recent promotion. You lose 1 year, and the next year after you see the motivation, you really want to do it. And in 97, we defeated Cooper at Forfar. Any memories of that day? Must have been a good one, I suppose, getting to National League for the first time.
Aye, I mean, it was a day. Was it the day after Lady Diana's funeral or something like that? I think it was. No, it was on the day of Lady Diana's funeral. It was on the Saturday, and I still remember one of the guys for the press saying, you playing the game?" I said, "Aye, well, none of the boys are going to the funeral." Thinking, God, here I go, I've opened my big mouth. But we posted a decent enough total. But then when it started, I think Sean referred to it in his podcast. I mean, Andy B came running into the ball and turned his ankle before he released the delivery, the first delivery of the innings.
He must be thinking, "Oh, it's just not our day, is it?" But,
yeah. Well, then the young golden arm took 5 wickets, and he wasn't fit to. He got a slab of beer for winning for being man of the match, and the rest of the boys drank it, and he had to watch That was how it worked. And by that stage, Visa was back from his hospital visit. So it was it was quite a comfortable win in the end. We did ourselves justice on the day there.
Yeah. So another figure from that point there was Grant Dugmore. He seems like he was a great player, was he? He came over as an overseas. Was he a local or overseas? I'm not sure what the situation was there.
He wasn't a local, but on the other hand, he was almost local because he was Megan Coetzer's brother.
Okay.
So and he an uncle to the boys. So I mean, Grant came across and he stayed. He had played in the indoor cricket at the exhibition centre a few years previous. He'd been across and he'd played in the six-a-side league. I think he played in the Dyce side at one stage when he was across here just visiting.
Mm-hmm.
And then, but he was a topper of a bat.
Yeah.
And a great fielder. And he bowled offies, which he bowled reasonably well.
Mm-hmm.
He was here for two or three years. He broke. I'm sure he broke bones in his hand one year and didn't play at all. And I don't know what he'd done, but no, he did tremendous influence as well. He scored an awful lot of runs. And he played primarily in the grades, and then he played 1 year. The year we were in the Premiership in '99, when we probably were. We were pretty raw with a lot of kids. I think that's what we've said before. It was a lot of kids, and also that year the weather was pretty awful.
Yeah.
And I think some of the Edinburgh and Glasgow teams thought that we would be a soft touch, and so they got us to drive down to Edinburgh and Glasgow, and then you just come back without getting a game. And that's sickened 2 or 3 of our players. You know, they were fed up. To hell with this. That was.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, well, I mean, we settled in okay to National League. I suppose Cricket Scotland they kept on changing the structure and everything. So I suppose, later on we settled into probably where we should have been. We'll get on to that anyway. Just talking about Grant Dugmore scoring a lot of runs. 2000, probably the best player to ever play for Stoneywood Dyce, maybe. Arno Jacobs got signed. Any memories of him? He sounds like some hell of a player.
I didn't see him playing that often. I played alongside him once, and here's one for you, Jabba. I still remember Mike Lowe, overseas amateur for Huntley, Alan Barron, bowled Jacobs, not a lot. Had to get that one in. You'll notice I'm not wearing my retro top. I was thinking of that, especially for you, Mike, but I thought I would do without it. No, Arno scored a lot of runs. I didn't see many of the big games because I was playing for some of the other sides, for the third 11 or the fourth 11 that we were playing at that stage. So, but yes, I mean, you heard David Lamb saying there was a busload of old buffdies came across for the West Coast because they'd heard about this guy and they went to the game at Fort Hill. Mm-hmm. Sure enough, he scored runs because Fort Hill was always a road.
Yeah.
I think Fort Hill, I think, is the only place I ever wore a lid. The rest of the time, I just managed to get out of the way.
Yeah, so I mean, I was looking at it. The period from '98 to 2008 is, we kind of just balanced ourselves out. Is there any moments in there that you'd like to touch on? Because I mean, we kind of just balanced ourselves out in the national leagues. They kept on changing the structure. Any key figures or things you want to mention there?
Well, you just mentioned Arno there. Arno almost took us back up to the Premier League, which we wouldn't have been fit for. We'd have been no better off.
Yeah.
So, I mean, after Arno, who did we have? It was Paddy. Yeah. I mean, Arno was a tremendous player. Mm-hmm. You could tell with the work ethic and the training as well. When at practice, how he was doing things, he'd be throwing down single stumps and doing things, and he was. I'd seen him a couple of years before he came to us because South Africa A did a tour of the UK, and they certainly played down at Forfar at Strathmore's ground, and I saw him somewhere else. I can't remember, but that's nothing to do with how we got him because we actually got him through an agency.
Yeah.
Because because Grant Dugmore had actually applied for and got a job as the ICC development manager in South America, based in Buenos Aires. So when Grant did that, we'd go down a different path.
Yeah, I mean, we went down the pro thing, pro route for a while. So we're Kruger van Wyk, the only player to, not Michael's best mate, I don't think, but the only player to play Test cricket from Stoneywood. Sangram Singh seemed like a great batsman as well. But then I suppose after that, a few people have said we went down instead of getting a hired hitter, I think David Lamb called it, we went down the coaches route, and probably one of the reasons why we've produced so many great players. I mean, Paddy Statler is there. Paddy Maroney himself, I suppose, in 2001 was a great coach. Obviously, a great player as well. But I mean, so what's your thoughts? I'm assuming you were involved in a lot of decisions, pros and all that.
Yeah, I was always keen that we had a coach who would leave us a legacy, a production line of kids, as opposed to winning a flower pot which you would put on the shelf and have to hand back next season. So I was, to my mind, that wasn't how we needed to go. I was keen that we had people who would coach and would encourage others to participate in the sport. In other words, getting people at the starter level.
Yeah.
And there've been people like Ian Leask and I have been around the whole time with the juniors on that Friday night. We did it for years and years and years. We were there and we were encouraging, but the fine tuning was done by some good coaches.
Exactly. Yeah, I mean, as you say, the Arnold Jacobs thing, if we got promoted that year, the next year's completely different, isn't it? You're playing at a level that you probably shouldn't be playing at, and
up and down like a yo-yo.
Yeah. Exactly. So I mean, a key signing, I suppose, over the years has been Jan Stander. So can you remember how that came about? And obviously, what he's done for the club has been pretty special.
He was sitting at the table next to us at the grades dinner one October, November, and somebody tapped him up and said, fancy using your coaching qualifications? Yes. Right. We'll have a little news about this later. And, it all sort of led on from there. He'd been at Manifield as an overseas amateur, but he had this coaching qualification and he had the aptitude for doing it. And I mean, I wasn't involved in the negotiations or anything of that sort. Though I may have rubber stamped the approach, but he fancied the challenge that was there and came across. And yes, he's been not only a tremendous competitor for the club with bat and ball, but also a huge influence, and he remains a huge influence.
Absolutely, yeah.
Because what we're speaking about now is about 15 years, or what are we at?
Well, he's been there for 13, 14 years now.
Aye, he's been around, all of that time. He's seen a lot of changes. He's seen a lot of personnel come and go. Probably been frustrated with some of that because his level of commitment he's given to the club has been tremendous. But he's there with ideas as well. It's not just coaching and it's not just playing. He's there with ideas of how to improve things, whether that be facilities. I mean, when we levelled one of the buildings and something slightly larger than I visualised ended up being in the same footprint.
Yeah, hey, that's another thing actually I was going to say. Do you remember building the clubhouse at Stoneywood? At People's Park, even.
I remember it being refurbished.
So when you acquired it, there was no clubhouse. Am I right in saying that?
No. That clubhouse had come up from away down in the mill grounds away in the 1870s or something like that. That clubhouse, the floor that's currently collapsed or had collapsed last season.
It's all fixed now.
Well, I mean, it was. It's been repaired 2 or 3 times over, but that bit where we'd have our tea nowadays has existed for years. And in fact, the front part of that used to be like a stand, and people would change behind the stand. There was like terraced seating on that, and it sat at the airport fence, looking down the length of the pitch. That's where it sat at one stage. Then the whole thing was moved.
Okay.
But I think even the moving of that predates anyone who's currently connected to the club. I think everyone who would have been around then has long since passed on.
No, it's just because I remember Lammy speaking about retiling the bathroom and everything. So I wondered if you'd actually built the whole The whole
Oh,
clubhouse.
No, they kept me out of the way. They knew I'd be hopeless if it came to doing anything practical. I can cut grass and do things like that and sit in a roller, but didn't ask me to build anything. There was a couple of young lads that came to us from Manfield at one stage, Stephen and Mark Seligman, and their father was always full of great ideas. And he was certainly involved in putting the bolts on the doors for the toilet, but the dafty put them on the outside. So that wasn't a lot of use, but it doesn't matter. Just thought I'd throw that one in.
Yeah, so we're signing of Jan Standard 2007. So, I mean, I'm looking at it here, and I had a look on all the scorecards and everything. I mean, would you say the Stoneywood best ever side was about 2009, 10, 11? And is it probably a bit of an injustice that we didn't ever win anything big?
No, we were never big enough to win in. We never had the real depth to sustain things, really.
Mm-hmm.
We've had a lot of useful overseas players. We've had a lot of useful locals.
Yeah.
And I mean, I'm not describing David Lamb as useful. He was more than useful. He was bloody good. As was Robert. But you know, there's been lots of them have passed through us, and we've also obviously there've been people who've been come through us, like Kyle and Gordon Gowdy and who have whiskey more recently, who've moved on to bigger things and probably playing amongst others who are more consistent, as opposed to our guys who are a great bunch, but maybe not always going to be consistent.
Mm-hmm.
It's difficult to say when the best side would have been. No, it's really difficult to work out when the best side was. Maybe the first year of Jan as well, with an overseas guy called Vickers Bota, who'd spent a year up in Huntly. But when he came to us, he'd a stress fracture, and he always played about a third of the season.
Yeah.
So he would have been a good player as well. I mean, what we'd seen of him.
Yeah, no, I saw. I mean, obviously we got to the Scottish Cup semi-final as Nine and Cregan spoke about, and players were left out, and they maybe couldn't have been. And then it's probably I always just think you look back to have the players we've had, produced players we had, to not have ever won anything is maybe the only thing that we haven't done as a club yet. But
we've done well. It needed everybody to click, and maybe a couple of those cup semi-finals and things like that we played in. And because a cup tie on the day, over a season we've probably ended up where we should be, because maybe the consistency hasn't quite been there. But often in cup ties, we've been in a couple of. Well, we were in the SCU Trophy final way back about 90. I'll say about 96. I'm not exactly sure if I've got that right. But we were in it. We've been in a couple of finals and things, but just never quite
go over the line. So I mean, we've got it written down here. 2011, the second 11 won the Strathmore Union Premier. A certain Azar Ali was Mr. Henderson's bunny that year, wasn't he? Did he not get him out a few times?
Well, he certainly got him out up at Huntly.
Yeah.
I remember. Caught what Bold Henderson.
Yeah, I always thought he got him out twice, because I just remember him badgering on about he got Azar Ali out twice.
I think he got 20 odd that day, Azar Ali, and he was a lovely timer of a ball. He's not like the barnacle ball that bats in the test matches, where he digs in and he faces more deliveries than most other folk, and he's had a great career. Yeah,
absolutely. So a main thing, I suppose, another amalgamation, I suppose, that happened is Queen's Cross joined forces with Stoneywood in 2011. Can you remember that? And I suppose that's another major point in our history. I suppose it brought people like Robin Taylor to the club, who's been a fantastic servant to the club over his time.
Well, that's another example there of somebody who did a lot of work at his club, and when he came to us, he just slotted in and started doing work as well.
Mm-hmm.
Queen's Cross had 2 or 3 older guys, but there are a lot of lads that had been pals for years together, and quite a few of them were at university. And at that stage, we'd had Georgie Boy. I've got to comment on Georgie's hat. Why was he wearing that floppy hat during the podcast? Is he needing a haircut? My father Jack Lucas, what it is.
How did it come about?
Peter Irvin there was Keith Davidson. You know, there was a handful of guys that were these. You know, they were committed to playing with us, and some of their mates were at Queen's Cross, and they came across to us, and one of them was a guy, Grant Jimison, who'd actually been playing for us for a couple of seasons, then went back to Queen's Cross, and he came back again, but then, well, a swarm of them ended up at Manifield for some unknown reason. Fair enough, you know.
Yeah.
If that's what they wanted to do. So the Queen's Cross thing, there was only Robin and his brother Rory and Neil Wright were the ones that lasted. Neil Wright was a damn good player in his younger days.
He was a good player. I remember playing with all three then.
Left arm swing bowler, good bowler.
I suppose one thing that did do for a few years is perk up the third and fourth teams to maybe give some of the younger guys, you know, I think we'll get onto it later, but like myself and the Mamoons, the Al Mamoons and all that, I mean, it gave them a game of cricket on a bit of extra numbers.
Aye, and it also gave us a level. You'd National League, you'd Strathmore Union, you'd Grade 2 with Queen's Cross, and then you'd a fourth and 11 playing further down. And we did have with the numbers to make it happen, having 4 sides. We'd 5 for a couple of seasons.
Yeah, there was a few seasons with 5 11s. Yeah,
that was. I mean, I remember playing in one game, and it was pretty. It was a very good side, but there was just we got 55 folk on the field on one particular Saturday. The rest of the time it rained. It rained almost every Saturday, so there was always at least one of the 11s washed out.
One of the 11s washed out. Managed to. Yeah.
Aye.
No, so that's good. I mean, that's probably about it, to be honest. I mean, we've been through all the rest. You haven't been as close to the club and the rest, even though you've always remained a loyal supporter. So I mean, as we've gone over the newer stuff. Obviously, we've gone back. We've been back in Strathmore Union, and very similar story actually. Playoff in 2017, we just weren't at the races. Playoff in 2018, we absolutely battered Kelso to get back in. So, I mean, have you got any memories from the last, 7-8 years? I know you haven't been exactly involved.
I wasn't able to commit myself to turn up. It was parental illness at one stage, and taxi service and God knows what all, and running around, and just generally getting older. I mean, you don't get a grey beard like this for no good reason. It's the rest of what's on top's bleached with the sun, but the beard's genuinely grey. It's I didn't have the. I was over committed probably for a number of years. I was probably doing far too much at one stage, and I could guess it needed more than one person to replace me in terms of the things I was doing.
I think we're still feeling your impact, AB.
Aye, but I'm done. In terms of used to be involved with the juniors all the time, and that was Monday, Wednesday, Friday was juniors, playing this Saturday, working on the ground, other times. Take your pick.
Well, that's what I'm going to get on to. I mean, the big question at Stoneywood, and probably why Stoneywood is on the map in Scottish cricket, is producing unbelievable talent and continually doing it with very limited resource. I mean, you look at some of the bigger clubs and they couldn't list 2 players that they've produced. So from your perspective, how and why have we produced some of Scotland's best players at our club?
I think a lot of it's to do with how we give people chances. We give them opportunities. I mean, as a youngster, I was playing the reserve grade side and I batted in the top order and we'd open the bowling. But when I got into the first team, it was a long time before I got anything to do. And I always thought, nah, this isn't right. You've got to make sure that the youngsters are getting a chance to contribute, because that way they'll come back. And we've always had people who had the ability to pass on coaching tips. There was the enthusiasts like me and Leask that made a lot of things happen. We were the ever present. We were the glue. But there was other people who'd come and go. There was a lot. I mean, there was a lot of good work done in the schools initially. We're not able to do that to the same extent. But I mean, that was when you were taking across a pro and paying or a coach, whatever it might have been, and paying them to do whatever. And well, we don't have a money tree. We certainly don't. I mean, we'd a run of 4 years when we ran dinners, and they raised money that helped pay for that helped pay for ground equipment, covers, sight screens, you know, doing up the inside of places, of the premises and whatever.
Yeah.
But I think it was a lot to do with, even when we were youngsters, when you first came into that side with the likes of Danny Cohen and Moyer and me, I mean, you were all getting something to do. You weren't the, you weren't the tail end Charlie that just ran for fine leg to fine leg.
Absolutely, yeah, absolutely. I mean, yeah, as you said, I mean, we will get on to your latter years of playing, as you say, when I came into the side and everyone else in grade 2, and we were playing with a Sabbath and a Deep, who were great players. Kiddo, Andy Rayner, Rory Saunders, great player, Freedies. I mean, but as you say, we all got something to do, and that's why we've all become decent players, you know, because we didn't bat at 11, and as you say, just don't touch the ball.
We'd done that for years with all the young lads that had come through that had played with the age group sides for Scotland and district stuff and whatever. We toughened them up by playing that little cricket at the weekend, but they got their own age group stuff during the week. So they were able to take their experiences from the weekend into the age group stuff, and sometimes dominate the age group games because they were accustomed to being dominated by adults. So
that's it. I mean, back in the day, I remember playing under 11 games, as you say, under 11 on a Monday, under 13 or under 15 on a Wednesday. I mean, that just doesn't happen anymore, unfortunately. But I mean, that is exactly, we were playing cricket all summer, and on the Saturday you played senior, and
we'd enough old heads, experienced campaigners who knew the script and were able to bring the young ones into games and make sure they got something to do.
Yeah. So I mean, on the Scotland stuff, obviously you mentioned it. I mean, this is probably one of the most prouder days in it to be a Stoneywood member. I mean, 3 completely homegrown players. I think your comment on this Facebook was, are we proud? Of course we're proud. All 3 of their mum and dads are Stoneywood Dyce through and through. So I mean, we've had 7 internationals linked to us, 5 of them completely homegrown. I mean, your thoughts on that? I mean, it is quite remarkable, isn't it?
Oh, it is quite remarkable. We'll still go back to that thing we did in TV with BBC Scotland a couple of years ago with David Curry and whatever, where I spoke rubbish, Jan spoke rubbish, Bob Lamb poured a cup of tea for somebody, and various others, and Gordon Gowdy was sitting in the Gowdy stand. But at that stage, Gordon Gowdy wasn't playing for us, Michael Leask wasn't playing for us. But in the tea room were Maura Gowdy and Hilda Leask. They were still, you know, rolling their sleeves up and doing things for the club, even though their young lads had moved on.
Yeah, exactly. And I mean, we've had 20 juniors represent Scotland at junior level and 7 internationals, and I mean, you know, all of them pretty much are homegrown. Obviously, we don't count Ailsa Lister really, even though she's moved to us now, and Jan, obviously, we can't possibly count as homegrown. But to have 27 Scotland representatives, I just think is bewildering with and it just speaks volumes about people like yourself. You know, we don't have a limited resource, we don't have a money pot in the corner, and it's people like yourself who came up every day almost and made it what it is. And one thing I wrote in here is the old timers playing in the grades. I mean, Fee Urquhart mentioned it, Bob Lamb, playing with Bob Lamb, playing with yourself. You and Leask played very late on. I mean, and it's what gave us the introduction to cricket, and what probably gave us a game on a Saturday. You guys could easily have sat at home or sat at People's Park and watched, but you came out and gave us a game, and that's why we're probably still playing.
Yeah, I mean, it's interesting. I mean, Kyle always does this, and he's right to do it as well. I mean, before Stoneywood and Dyce came together, they stayed in Afford, and the 3 young boys went across to Inverurie, and Ron Fleming did some coaching with them there, and he always credits Ron, and it's good that he does that, because he was part of the starting. That's where they all started, and that was in the days when there was no junior. The junior section at Stoneywood had fallen into disrepair. The juniors at Dyce, proper kids, were non-existent other than the 3 Coetzers. And at that stage, Kyle was hell of a young anyway. But you know, you could tell there was a talent and application.
Yeah, but I mean, it is definitely important for guys to be nurturing the talent in the grades. I mean, you've listened to all the podcasts. I mean, Kyle mentioned it, Gowd mentioned it, Fee mentioned it. I mean, some of my fondest memories even are playing in the grades. I mean, it's where you learn the game and it's where you have a lot of fun. And I've had some great games in the grades. And I mean, the fact that everyone remembers it just shows how important it is. And, you know, people like Robin Taylor, Tarek Butt, Mike Lowe are all doing it now. So, as you say, the baton gets passed on.
Yep.
So, I mean, that's good. I mean, that's a overview club history. I think it's quite interesting to see how these two sides come together. And I mean, I said it earlier, it's probably the best non-11, you know, not being able to make an 11 that's ever happened, the best phone call that's ever happened. So have you got anything else to say as a overall for the club history?
No, it's been great to be there through it. I mean, and just contribute a little bit here and there. I mean, I deliberately got myself involved in some of the committee stuff as well, so that Stoneywood Dyce were known, and my voice was also known, and the raised eyebrows were known, and various things. And you know, I wasn't too worried about whose feathers I ruffled. If it needed to be done, it was done. You know, but you know, I mean, I did that. Again, it was a tactic to get Stoneywood Dyce in the limelight.
Yeah.
And I knew what I was doing. I knew what I was doing.
Yeah. So anyway, we'll get on to a wee Q&A about your own cricketing ventures.
Okay.
So to start with, a favourite match that you've ever played in?
Favourite match for me would have been the semi-final of the Small Clubs Cup in '91, when by winning that we got the chance to go back to the national final, because we'd lost in 1985 to Dundee University staff, Saudi Arabian under 16 ineligible players, whatever. We weren't good enough on the day. It was one of those. But that cup semi-final, I mean, it got down to the stage where Colts, with a couple of wickets, 2 or 3 wickets in hand, needed a 6 off the last ball to win the game, and I think they got 1. By that stage, I was absolutely gone, because I'd knackered my knee in the quarter final, and just Iron Horse was never going to give up. But I bowled my 10 over straight there. I think no wickets for about 20 odd in a fairly high scoring game. I remember just putting the brakes on some of the Colts sort of flowing bats, and I also remember Davy McKinnon catching Greg Gomez on the boundary at point off Adrian Weddingham, where the ball was hit like a bloody rocket, and Davy was a height of half a chinty, and he's put his hands above his head and caught it. You know, Davy was a great fielder. He really was. But that was that's the favourite game for me. Was actually, I contributed reasonably well myself, but I was you know, I was wicketless, but God, I was so mean with the bowling. And you'd Whiskey and Robert Lamb, David had to bowl, and I kind of think, who else the other bowler? Adrian Weddingham was there. John Fraser was working abroad, so he was missing for the side.
Yeah. So a favourite Stoneywood Dyce match watched, or you know?
There's been mentioned in a couple of the podcasts already, the chasing 320 odd or 330 odd down at Dundee High School.
Cregan, tennis bat.
Cregan's his tennis shotty, and it was Darren Nachel, or however they pronounce his name. I think Stuart Coetzer had a big score as well. Yeah. I mean, that was a great game. It was one of those things. You could tell you were always in with a shout, and then it would slip a bit, and then you'd be back in the driving seat, then slip again. But it was a great game. You're trying to keep the score and trying to concentrate on that. And
so I mean, from the scorebox in that game, Phil, surely you must have been going at half time. We haven't got a chance here, or did you believe? No. Yeah. That's what I was thinking, because Cregan was saying, oh, you know, Stuart Coetzer walked in on his Jack Callis moment, you know, obviously taking the piss out of their 50 runs short, but it seems as if Darren and Stewie just went out and whacked it.
Stuart Coetzer, when he clicked, was just something special, absolutely special.
Yeah.
Talented.
Only if he'd had a few beers the night before.
So we would always say.
Anyway, a Stoneywood, and I think we've had a few of these probably over the years. I can think of a few anyway. A Stoneywood youngster who you thought could have been really, really good, most potential, and maybe just got away, stopped playing cricket for whatever reason.
Fraser Murray.
Yeah, he's been mentioned a few times.
Yeah, he ended up being one of the better juniors in the Northeast. He played in, I think, the Scotland under-15 side. He was one of the better juniors in the North under-15 side. And the person that was coaching at that stage knew his capability, so wasn't too worried. Didn't have a wicket-keeper. Put Fraser behind the stumps, and he knackered his knee. And from there on in, he was never quite the same. Never quite the same. His knee was goosed. The other one that would come to mind with me would be Abdullah Afridi, because he could bat and he could bowl on some of those left arm Chinaman stuff.
Yeah, you can pick it. I remember it.
Turning at a mile, and it was how he would. It was watching adults walking off having been bowled by him, and just for the incoming batsman, they would say, "What's he doing?" "Pushed about a yard outside off stump and hit middle." Oh. You would position yourself to hear what they were saying, and it was just so funny.
And he's a handy brother as well. I think they were all really good players.
Aye, well, they meaning the wee one.
Yeah. I mean, you're right. I remember playing with Abdullah, and he was just because he started off being a bowler. And he was pretty quick for his age, if I remember. And then he started bowling the spin, and you just couldn't pick it. A proudest moment as a member over the years. I mean, I'm sure there's been many moments where you've been proud of, but
the one that I would say tops a lot is when we ended up second in grade 3 in 2010, when it was a team of local homegrown kids, and usually about 7 or 8 of them, and permanent any 3 from Danny Cohen, Colin Moyer, myself, and a uni lad, JP, Jagadish Pulisayeri. JP's still a character. He was a character. And he's still playing cricket. You see pictures of he's on Facebook. You see him still involved in cricket, and he's quite a. He was an enthusiast as well, and he was a super lad. He's from Kerala, the same as George. Really fine lad. But it was all those youngsters, and you mentioned Rory Saunders there. He ended up getting the yips. Remember, he was in the Scotland under-15 training squad over the winter. When he came back next summer, he couldn't release the ball. It would either land in his own toes, go sailing, or the batsman's head without a bounce, go whizzing past the umpire. He just lost it completely. The lad was, he had a good talent as well.
One player we haven't actually mentioned is Jamie Rogers. I always thought Jamie Rogers was a fantastic player. I loved watching him bat. He's probably another one that he moved away for uni and stuff like that. But I never thought he got the credit he deserved. I always thought he was a cracking batsman.
Yeah, he could score runs in the juniors. When it came to adult stuff, he tended to play too much in the V between square leg and mid wicket. He played across the line, and then he didn't have too many in the offside unless it was a mistake. No, but Jamie was a super lad as well, and you could also throw Jamie the ball, and he would produce he was a partnership breaker.
Yeah,
he was bowling with lead drifters.
No, you're right. And that's a great team. That's probably my start of senior cricket, and as you say, I mean, it's a young side of homegrown talent, and you all gave us chances. I'll say with the legends of yourself, Danny Cohen, Colin Moyer, as backup, as you say, been there, done that, and you showed us the way, and we did really well there.
The thing that you young ones probably never noticed was if it was a hell of a wind blowing one end to the other, Colin Moyer and I bowled into that wind and left the young ones with the wind at their back. If whether you ever really noticed it, because we never mentioned it, but that was the tactic. We'd been hit by better players, so we weren't too worried about getting scalped around by. If that's what happened, that's what happened. But we weren't going to have a youngster's day ruined by the fact that they were struggling into a gale.
Yeah.
So if you were bigger in the sort of had a better base when it came to releasing the ball, because you were heavier for a start, you weren't getting blown away.
A funniest teammate over the years?
I mentioned him a few times there, Moyer.
Yeah.
I mean, tremendous player, hit the ball a mile, ridiculous catches, bowl his left arm tweakers, keep wicket, take your pick. Some of the things off the park, I mean, I'm scared to mention some of them all. I'll get as far as fartlighting. I mean, just something else.
I need to get him on for a podcast, I think.
You're sitting in a crowded pub, and all of a sudden he starts lighting farts. I mean, he was a teammate of mine all through the years. All the way through. Great guy to have in your side.
One of my first ever memories of senior cricket is Colin Moyer just bowling, and then the ball gets hit back at him. I think he took a fifer in this game. It was at Duffy Park. I can't remember. I think he took a fifer, and I just vividly remember fielding him. This ball got absolutely whacked at Colin Moyer, and he just sticks his foot out. Because obviously, for everyone who doesn't know, he had a
amputated ball with the knee.
Amputated foot. So, and he just sticks his foot out, and it just hits this, I don't know what the word. What's the word? Fake foot or whatever, and just stops it. And the batsman just like the eyes go wide. And what is he doing? And he just keeps stopping the ball with his foot. And of course, they realise when he takes it off at half time. He used to have a thing of that, didn't he? He used to like take it off and scare the living daylights out of all the opposition. But that's my memory of him. And also, I mean, I think Andy Rayner always says that he's his Stoneywood hero. But I remember a game at Duffy Park. I don't know if you were playing. We were chasing about 120, and Andy Rayner's batting with Colin Moyer. Andy Rayner's second top score was 7 not out. Colin Moyer got 110 not out. And it was just ridiculous. I mean, he's got one leg to all extensive purposes, and he's just hitting the ball out ridiculous. He was an amazing player, and I remember, great fondness.
I think Duffy Park won that, wasn't it? And he hammered the ball in the middle of folk were getting a wedding photograph taken.
He was a ridiculous player. I mean, I'd have loved to see him when he was in his pomp, because I remember it was the tail end where you and him played. He was just ridiculous.
But even when we started out, we played reserve grade cricket together, and then we were in and out of the Stoneywood first team in the late 70s. My first year as captain in '81, it was right at the start of that season. There was a midweek junior cup final up at Heathery Fold, and that's when Colin broke his leg, and that led to so that was '91. So I didn't have him in my armoury at that stage for a couple of seasons. But then it was '93 was the time that he banged whiskey into the car park 2-3 times. So he was playing with the artificial leg.
And exactly. I mean, that just makes it even more ridiculous how good he was. Anyway, moving on. So your best ever individual performance. I mean, I'm sure there's been plenty over the years.
Not too many with a bat. Because for years I never got a bat. Because with a decent enough side, I didn't have to bat. You didn't. Forgot how to bat if ever I could. The best one was probably a cup semi-final. I'm going to say 1996 at Coetzer, when Coetzer were reasonably well placed in their 40 overs, and it was coming towards the end of innings. And all of a sudden, I ended up with 5 wickets, but I think I took 3, and I got rid of the last 3 men in the space of 4 balls or something. And all of a sudden, what was looking like a promising score for them just wasn't anymore.
Yeah.
And I mean, this great big fat guy for them, and I said, I'm just going to York this guy, because he'll never see the ball if it's in amongst his feet, because they'll disappear out of his line of sight. Sure enough, leg stump, whoosh, thank you very much, next. That's the one that sticks in my mind. There's a few times I would banjo the ball about. Kyle did a Q&A at the start of the last season at Manifield. Kenny Reid got him to come for that, and a few of us went into it. And he says to me before we started, remember that year we were sponsored for runs? I said, aye. I said, I scored 60 odd one week and 70 odd the next, and I sponsored myself at £1 a time. Schoolboy error. Schoolboy error.
Yeah. That was an 8-8 out, was it, for the Aberdeen Jesters?
Oh, aye. I was
your highest ever score?
Aye. I was bowled, and the off bail went up in the air, did a full 360 and landed back in the grooves. And that was when I was in very few, and then I was dropped about 7 or 8 times. Dougie Anderson would tell you about that. Dougie was at the other end. He was in his 40s when I went into bat, and I got to 50 before him. It was just going everywhere. It was great. That was great fun playing against a lot of expats in the Costa del Sol. And often in the teams he played against, they might have had somebody maybe owned a pub or managed a pub. So you went back to their bar after the games, and you played pool and darts and had a bar supper, and you were into it.
Fantastic, yeah. That sounds great. So then, on a different note, a best Stoneywood Dyce performance that you've watched, or so you've been scorer over the years and just general supporter?
The year we got to the SCU Trophy final, the semi-final was in Edinburgh against Royal High, and Grant Dugmore scored 170 odd. That was just a worldie.
Yeah.
Absolute worldie.
That's probably the best ever Stoneywood Dyce knock, isn't it? It's been mentioned a few times.
I think so. I think it's the highest ever score. And Casper wasn't far away with one. Casper van der Walt had a big score one day.
Did someone get 200? Yeah, I think he got a 200, didn't he?
You think he maybe did 200 in Strathy, but he didn't. He was in the Strathie one year, and then he was in the National League the next.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, I think he'd have been 170 in the Strathie in the National League as well, I think.
That must be quite frustrating though, because obviously getting beat by Kirkstofton in the National League playoff, but then beating them in the cup, it must have been quite frustrating. But I suppose, as we touched on earlier, it was bittersweet when we came back next year and won. Anyway, favourite opposition over the years?
Favourite opposition?
Yeah.
Have I got a favourite opposition? Colts.
Yeah.
Because my father had played for Colts before he came to Stoneywood, and I quite liked playing against Colts. Didn't beat them as often as you might have wanted, because they were a damn good side for a while.
Yeah.
But I used to like bowling down at Colts. You'd have thought somebody bowling my sort of stuff might have been carted around in a smallish field, but
yeah, the short boundary.
It didn't happen as often as it probably should have done.
It's the same as Stoneywood, doesn't it? Everyone thinks, I think Paddy Maroney said it, everyone thinks you're going to rock up at Stoneywood and bomb you straight down the ground, but when it gets caught up in that wind.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. As David Lamb said, I used to be quite good at talking the opposition out. Because I would say something controversial in order to make them make a mistake, and quite often they did. It was just a little bit of mind games.
Yeah,
it happens.
Nothing wrong with a bit of mind games. Cricket's all about mind games.
Yeah.
Favourite opposition ground over the years?
Rossie Priory, down between Dundee and Perth.
Mm-hmm.
I think Inshore, I think, is the nearest city. At the left-hand side, if you're heading.
Has it got cows on the way or something?
Aye, there's cows, and you go down and you drive towards a gate, open the gate, drive through, shut it behind you, drive further on, and this goes right. The field that the cows are in goes round the cricket field, I think. I remember a great big white bull there. Jesus, I wasn't very keen to open the gates that day.
I've never played there, but yeah, it sounds great.
I was down there with a couple of times we played in the Small Clubs Cup, and once I was down with a Grampian and Highland combined select age group team against Angus and Tayside, such as Arbroath and Forfarshire or and whatever it might be. The sort of lads were playing there.
Yeah.
Great story. That semi-final, the first year of the Small Clubs Cup in 1985, we batted first, scored about 140. They were batting second, and it was raining, and the umpires offered them the to come off for bad conditions, and they said no. They stayed on for another 3 or 4 overs, which I think we bowled about 3 maidens out of that 4 overs. So the heavens did open this time, and the umpires took us off, and we never ever got back on. But the guy who was next in was their captain, and he was all padded up, bat, gloves, hat, whatever. He was all ready to go in. When the umpires took us out to have a look at the pitch, he was trying to convince the umpires that it was playable. But he was now wearing wellies and had a great big golf umbrella. And I'm the psychological warfare job here. The boy did it himself. Absolutely superb. It was just what a daft.
I know we've had some absolute belters over the years. We've talked about quite a few of them, but a favourite overseas player?
On sheer volume of runs, the two that come to mind for me are Arno Jacobs and Grant Dugmore.
Mm-hmm.
Now, I've only played once with Arno. Did I mention that, Mike?
Not sure, you can maybe mention it again, because Michael will be watching.
Michael, Alan Barron, Bull Jacobs, not a lot. Good night. 3 Counties Cup game. I played quite a few times on Sundays with Grant Dugmore, and saw him in action, and he was just wonderful to spell when he was playing in the grades. He's probably the best that I'd come across, and just for sheer volume of runs.
Yeah.
And because I used to play in the lower sides on the Saturday and be taken in for cup games or whatever on the Sunday as an extra bowler. And that's how it worked, I think.
I suppose Grant Dugmore is up there with the people that we've said has taken them to the next level. I mean, Steve Knox, Grant Dugmore, Jan Stander, the list goes on, really. Yeah, so interesting one here then. So pick 3 batsmen, 1 from Stoneywood era, 1 from the Dyce era, and then 1 from the Stoneywood Dyce era to make your ultimate 3-man batting attack.
From Stoneywood, Ian McRae. Tremendous, absolutely tremendous. Scored runs at a pace, anything short, cut cut and pull onto it so quickly. From Dyce in their days, a Geordie lad, Kevin Smith, hell of a good bat. I've seen, been the receiving end of a few good knocks from him. Really, really good. And from the Stoneywood Dyce setup, David Lamb. David Lamb was just he was the man who flew the flag for Stoneywood in terms of as an adult for okay with some great coaches and pros who did very well. Certainly with David Shaw. Andy B was a tremendous player. Never ever played in the same side as Beezer, but I played against him when he was at Turriff, and he was a great player as well. But Grant Dugma would be he could have come into it, but he was, to my mind, he was overseas, so I wasn't picking any of the overseas ones.
Yeah. But David Lamb was a fantastic player. Everyone always says probably the unluckiest guy that played for Scotland.
Yeah, he was. But he was also a damn good fielder.
Yeah. So same question, but for bowlers.
For Stoneywood, Colin Clark. Colin Clark was rapid.
Yeah.
Rapid. Just give it his all. He was excellent. Ian Leask, just a machine. A big tall machine. He would run in and bowl and bowl and bowl and bowl. And
a fantastic fielder, as I say. I remember playing the grades, and every week he would take one ridiculous catch in the slips.
Yeah. He's got great big hands. He's tremendous. Remember way back in the days when I started, all the way through to maybe the 2000s, you could bowl 25 overs from two bowlers, 25 overs each. So Ian Leask would bowl 25 most games.
Yeah.
But then
and go for nothing.
Well, and you'd find that the guy at the other end was getting the wickets because they couldn't get Leasky away. It was the same with Colin Clark. That's where I got a lot of my wickets with my rubbish, because Colin Clark was bowling his heart out at the other end.
The burglar.
Yeah. And then, but the one from Stoneywood Dyce, it would probably be Burger, Robert Lamb. Just just a pocket-sized bowling machine. He just ran up and skidded up and bowled. He was very, very good. Okay, sometimes if he was just on the spot too much, you got a really top-class batsman who would just pick him off because he was maybe too accurate at times.
Yeah.
They knew exactly where the next ball was coming because he maybe didn't vary it or didn't have the variation perhaps, but he was certainly.
I'm sure if he was in this era, he'd have a few variations and maybe be handy.
Correct.
Exactly.
He didn't need them in the early, in his early cricket days.
Yeah, and he could bat as well, can't he?
God, aye. You can hit it a mile. Aye, powerful lad. Aye.
Yeah. So I know once again it's quite similar to the proudest, but the favourite moment. So a favourite moment over the years as a Stoneywood Dyce member.
I think the thing it impressed me more than many other things was when we used to have barbecues. If if we'd 4 sides out and 2 or 3 of them were playing in the northeast, we would have something after the game, and the crowds of folk would come up to those sort of things. Youngsters, this, that, and next thing. In recent years, there have been bouncy castles and God knows what all have been on the go. We made our own entertainment. We didn't have things like that way back in the in the early days. But I think I'm not so much the moments for me were some of those after the match things where people came along, or even if a game had been washed out and folk were doing belly flops and sliding through puddles down the length of the nearest side of the outfield.
Yeah.
And some of the things that were done then just completely daft, and it was just so much fun because everyone just mucked in, right from the youngest one to the oldest one. There was no airs and graces. Nobody was aloof. Everybody was there and everybody just mucked in.
Well, that's it. Family club through and through. Always have been, always will be.
I hope so.
Yeah. So, last question we'll end on. Your favourite win, just favourite league win, promotion win, cup win in your whole cricketing career.
I think I'll go to the 1976 Grade 1 win when Stoneywood finished level in points we can tour, but we'd the better goal difference or whatever the hell the fancy calculation was. But in the run, towards the end of that season, I just remember being involved in a lot of those games and coming in as a youngster and having to bat with a guy called Norman Ruff. Norman came to us from Huntly and worked at the Stoneywood paper mill. He's back up in Huntly these days. His son still plays occasionally for Huntly, Kevin. But Norman was winning games. Norman was one of these bats hardly ever out. He just, he was a finisher.
Found a way to get over the line, yeah.
And then the final game of the season, roughly either 6 or 7 wickets when he skittled turf for about 40 odd. You know, and so that was our final game. We just needed to win, and that also improved our, as I say, goal difference, whatever the terminology was.
Yeah. Yeah, so I mean that's good. So that's it. I mean that's a cracking Q&A. I mean I'm sure you found it hard to whittle down a close to 50-year tenure as a cricket player. And thanks very much for coming on, AB. You're a great servant for the club, and I love it when you come up to the club and still watch us to this day. And obviously, shame we couldn't get any cricket this season, but and also just a quick note: the notes that we had, I'll put them out. AB produced a fantastic document of all the club history through the years, the overseas amateurs, the leagues we were in, the main achievements and everything. So I'm going to put that out with this podcast, which just details our history really. So it's really interesting. So thanks for doing that, AB. And last thing, I always like to end on the Legends game. And AB, as I said at the start, I mean, we maybe bat about the legend word a bit too much, but I think you and people you've mentioned there, like Leask and yourself, are right at the forefront of it. And I noticed that you guys weren't at the Legend Day last year. Obviously, I'm not sure if that's because obviously Cregan just picked his people he played with, but I think this year we definitely need to get an old boys 11 in. So would you be keen for that?
Well, I'm not sure the moving parts I got to respond to well. I was creaking a bit towards the end, and that's 2011. God no. Well, I mean, I'm happy enough to come along. I'm not overly worried about playing in the game. I'm happy enough just to come along and wander around and have a laugh.
Yeah, I absolutely. I think we should try and get as many people as possible. If this pandemic and allows it, if it's ever changing, if we can get as many people up to the club. I think it was a cracking day last year. I'm sure it'll be a great day this year. And as I say, it'll be great to get all you boys along.
Yeah, no, I'm happy just to watch the game as opposed to, you know, I mean, I'd be a danger to myself nowadays, I think.
Anyway, that's good. Once again, EB, thanks very much for coming on, and thanks everyone for watching.